Hello everyone and welcome to Sunday. The other day I was looking through my emails and I came across something very interesting and very old. It was the receipt for my first Mac. The first thing I had ever bought from Apple.com. And it was a decade ago. I've had 10 years with Apple as of today. And I just thought that was really interesting and would make a pretty cool discussion video for the vlog. Now, before I get started, let me say that this is in no way, shape, or form, hopefully, obviously, any sort of like Mac versus Windows or iOS versus Android video. It's not the purpose of the video. It's just my personal experiences with using Apple products for the last 10 years, and also a cool little reflection of, you know, looking back on what my experiences and what I've owned in the last 10 years as far as Mac stuff is related. So that first computer that I bought was this one. And it may look familiar because I actually recently showed it off on the vlog because my parents were using this as their primary desktop. We took them from this 2007 plastic MacBook to a 2009 MacBook Pro. Still old computer, but it serves their needs just fine. This thing, old technology, this thing was blazing fast. It had a 2.16 gigahertz Intel Core 2 Duo processor. It had not one, but 2 gigs of RAM, running at a clock speed of 667 megahertz. It had a 160 gig hard drive, a 5400 RPM 160 gig hard drive, which I'm assuming was because Apple loved to rip you off. And it also had a optical drive back before Apple stopped caring about optical drives, and also ports, which they've stopped caring about since as well. But since then, I've been using Apple devices nonstop. Like there's not been a time where I've used Windows for my day-to-day work. Now I still own a Windows computer. Both Mal and myself have Windows computers, and we use them to play games. But as far as like our normal day-to-day for anything we do, or especially like related to work, for editing, for anything like that, every single thing that I've done in the last 10 years has been on a Mac or a computer running Mac OS. See, I used this from 2009 until or from 2007 until 2009. The reason I got this, by the way, was because after high school, I went to tour Savannah College of Art and Design and decided I was going to go there, but all of their classrooms there, or at least most of the classrooms, were Macintosh, and a lot of the software that they taught was Macintosh. And it was one of those situations that if I didn't have a Mac, I was going to have to constantly be visiting those computer labs. And I was like, that really sucks, so I think I'll just get a Mac instead. So I had used Windows my entire life, for 18 years, Windows. This was the first Mac I had ever owned, and when it came that summer, I didn't even know what to do. I turned it on and I was like, well, this is a little different. But I played with it every day, all summer, and I eventually fell in love. I really liked the operating system. I think back then it was Tiger at the time. They did Cats for a long time. But after I used this for 2 years, it was time to upgrade. It was time to build a PC while also making sure that I could have access to Final Cut, which I had fallen deeply in love with by that point. So I built a Hackintosh. Now that Hackintosh eventually became Mal's Windows computer, and she's still using it to today. But the Hackintosh was something I built in 2009, so I could continue staying inside of OS X. It was something that I loved so much, and I preferred it to Windows, and which that's what it all comes down to, by the way. I know there's so many people that want to start a war between the two, but really, just use what you want to use. That's it. If you prefer Windows, if you prefer Android, then cool. Do what is best for you. Do what is best for your productivity and your workflow. Period. I don't know why we have to argue about things, especially when there's a lot of people like myself that use both. But from 2009 until 2012, I used the first Hackintosh, and then in 2012, I built another Hackintosh. It wasn't until just a few months ago that I got this computer, which is the 2016 MacBook Pro, and to be honest, is my second official Mac. My first one was this one. Between this and that, I built 2 Hackintoshes. And I know why I did that. In college, money was obviously very tight and it was cheaper to build a computer. That being said, I would never build another Hackintosh because even though they're cheaper to build and you do have a lot of flexibility in what you can put in it, they're a headache. They're probably a little easier to deal with nowadays, but at the time when I built my first one in 2009, that scene was still very new. And getting OS X to run on a computer that you built was a huge pain. Like, ridiculously so. And there was a lot of times where you'd run into kernel panics and weird problems that you just didn't know how to fix. And then you would have to like post onto a forum and hope that someone else had the same problem and maybe had managed to fix it. And it was just it was a huge headache compared to just using Apple hardware. But that's how much I loved the software. I loved OS X, which is now known as Mac OS. I loved Final Cut. I loved GarageBand, and then I loved Logic. I had used all of this Apple software, and I preferred it. It was a really nice ecosystem. And ecosystem is a good word to use because eventually I got an iPod Touch, which interacted with everything, and then we got iPhones. And Mao has been using Mac for just about the same amount of time. Now, she grew up using Macs in a classroom. A lot of kids did. There was a lot of Apple computers in like elementary schools. I never had that experience, but Mao had at least touched a Mac before college. But in college, she also got one of these from her school, and then she eventually got that 2009 MacBook Pro, which my parents are using, and then she used that for a long time before I gave her my old Hackintosh when I built my new one, and then eventually her late 2015, early 2016 iMac. And those are all of the different Apple pieces of hardware that we've had. But we are I'd say at this point we're pretty firmly ingrained into the Apple ecosystem. We love using both the hardware and the software of the Mac. And it's one of those situations that, I know they advertise it and it's a little cliche or cringy or whatever, but they advertise that it just works, and it does for the most part, and I think that's one of the things I prefer. And I know that I've made some Windows user mad somewhere that says, well, if you know how to configure Windows, it works fine. And you're right. You're absolutely right. But having used both and having spent a lot of time using the software on both, I've really preferred Apple. And the reason I clarify all of that is because from time to time I get comments asking if we would ever leave, the Apple ecosystem. We've created all of the content on all of our channels only on Mac in the last 10 years. So every single thing you've ever seen on YouTube from either of us has been made on a Mac. And people have, wanted to know, would you ever leave it? And, it's possible. If they announced that they were going in a radical different direction that I just didn't agree with, then sure, I would. But that hasn't happened in 10 years, and I don't really suspect that to happen in the near future. So until then, we'll keep using Apple products and really enjoying the environment of the operating system on Mac. And that's my story. We've been using Apple devices for 10 years, and it's just it was just a cool thing that I noticed and I thought would be a cool vlog topic. Now what you can do is you can tell me about your experiences with Apple hardware. Do you use a Mac? I know these days a lot of people use iPhones. They may not use Macs. Mac itself, the computers, take up like 15% of the market share of personal computers, so it's very small. Less than 1 in 5 people own a Mac, which is fine. But I know that they are certainly out there, and if you use a Mac, I'd love to hear from you. I'd love to hear what your history was when you got it. Are you someone who just recently got into it? Are you someone who had an Apple II? Tell me all about it in the comments. I would love to hear it. Or maybe you're someone that just uses an iPhone, which is fine. A lot of people these days don't even have computers, and they don't really need them. They have like a phone, maybe a tablet, and that meets all of their needs, and that's awesome. But it's still, obviously we need computers for what we do, and we've been using Macs now for 10 years, and I don't think that will be changing anytime soon. So talk about your experiences with Apple, and I look forward to reading everything you guys got to say. Now that's it for today. Tomorrow morning, we'll be taking Sagan back to the vet just for a little checkup. Hopefully he's doing good. He seems to be recovering fine, although his tongue does bother him from time to time. He'll kind of like shake his head with his tongue out. But hopefully we get a good report then and see that he's doing fine. And otherwise we'll have to see what happens tomorrow. It's going to be a crazy day of work as we continue to prepare for this upcoming Wisconsin trip. Thanks for watching, and as always, let's meet back tomorrow, shall we?